Hello and welcome to another College Algebra Assistance video. I'm Shay Ortega. I'll be helping you out today. And today we'll be looking at functions, domain, and range. Before we get started, we probably want to look at what domain and range actually are. The definition of domain is the set of all possible input values, usually x, which produce an output when inserted into a function. The range, on the other hand, is the set of all those possible output values, again usually y, which result from using the function formula. Our first problem here is f of x equals x squared minus 4, and the section that you've got there, or the section on the problem where it shows the window, actually gives us the window that we could put in our calculator if you wanted to reproduce that same graph. Now the first question, it says, as the domain values vary from -3 to 0, the range values vary from, and we need to find those range values. So what we'll look at is our domain is, again, our x inputs from -3 to 0 and now we need to find out basically what our outputs are going to be. There's a couple different ways we can do that. The way I like to do it is to take my -3, so my -3, put that in, so -3 squared minus 4, and that's going to equal 9 minus 4, which equals 5. So that tells me that this y value, when x is 3, that value right there is -3, 5. Now if I put 0 in, I'll have 0 squared minus 4 equals -4. So that tells me when I have 0, my value right here is 0, -4. Now as far as going with my range, I know that my lowest y output is -4. That's the lowest I get on this graph if I were to just pay attention to the y-axis. So -4, and then the highest I go is at my -3 value for x, which gives me a 5 for my y output. So it goes from -4 to 5. Now the second question is, as the domain values vary from 0 to 3, the range values are. So again, we've got a similar situation where basically our range is going from 0 as our x all the way to 3. Now to do this, it's the same thing. We just put our values in, so we know 3 squared minus 4 equals 9 minus 4, which equals 5. And we've already done 0 squared, so we know the range is 0 to -4 is our lowest value, so -4 is our lowest output, and then our other value is, or our other position is 3, 5. So we know that 3's are our x, but we know that y, our largest y, is 5. So our range ends up being the same thing, from -4, our lowest number, to 5, a larger number. Now we go to the second equation. We've got a different graph, a little bit different window too, and a different f of x value. Now to do this, we'll do the same thing. Again, we've got to go from -3 to 0 and find out our range. So I'll do the same steps as I did before. I'll have 1 divided by -3 squared plus 1, and that's going to equal 1 over 9 plus 1, which equals 1 over 10. So I know when I'm at -3, this position right here is -3, 1/10. Now my other spot again is 0, so I'll go for when x is 0, and I get 1 over 0 squared plus 1, which equals 1 over 1, which equals 1. So I know that this position right here is 0 for my x and 1 for my y. Now again, if I go back to the question, my domain values, so my x ranges from -3 to 0, and my y outputs go from 1/10 as my lowest output from that domain all the way up to 1, which is my highest output, and that's my range. So my range is from 1/10 all the way up to 1. Now again, I've got from 0 to 3, so I'll do the same thing again. I've got 1 divided by 3 squared plus 1 equals 1 over 9 plus 1, which equals 1/10 again. So this position right here is 3 for my x and 1/10 for my y. So again, if I look at my range from 0 to 3, or my domain, excuse me, my domain is from 0 to 3. My range over those values is from 1/10, which is my lowest y, all the way up to 1. Now this last graph, we've got f of x equals the square root of x plus 3. Now this one, again, similar procedure. They give us a domain from -3 to 0, so we need to go from -3 on our x all the way to 0 and figure out what that range of y is going to be. Now again, to do that, we'll do the same thing. We'll put in -3 into our equation, so we've got the square root of -3 plus 3, which equals the square root of 0, which the square root of 0 is just 0. So we know that when we put in -3, this position right here is -3 for x and 0 for y. Now when I go over to the other value in my domain, which is 0 for x, I just put that in, so I go the square root of 0 plus 3 equals the square root of 3, and if you punch the square root of 3 into your calculator, it's about 1.732. So we know that when this position right here, when 0 is our x value, the square root of 3 is our y value, our output. So again, when our domain goes from -3 to 0 on our x values, our range, our y values, go from 0 all the way up to square root of 3. Now this one's a little bit different. Usually they have us go from 0 to 3, but this time we're just going to go with our domain from 0 to 1 as our x value. So to do that, we'll do the same thing. We've already got the value of 0, so we know what happens to our y at 0, it's square root of 3. But we want to find out what our value is at 1, so we'll put the square root of 1 plus 3 equals the square root of 4, which equals 2. Now it's a good thing we put that in our calculator before that the value is, or the value of square root of 3, because now we know that 2 is actually greater than 1.732, which is square root of 3. So our domain, when our x values go from 0 to 1, we know that our y values go from square root of 3 all the way to 2. I won't label that because I don't have enough room, and my graph kind of looks like it's actually going down, but it is actually gradually raising. So again, our domain, when we go from -3 to 0 as our x values, so again that's our domain, our range, which is our y outputs, are 0 to square root of 3. Again, that's when our domain is -3 to 0. And then when we go from 0 to 1, our y outputs go from square root of 3 and they go up to 2.